What if I told you that the very things you do every single day, those totally normal, seemingly harmless little routines, are actually dulling your mind over time? We usually walk around thinking our brains are pretty much untouchable. But in this explainer, we're going to flip that exact idea on its head. Because the reality is, you might just be slowly lowering your own intelligence without even realizing it. All right, let's just dive right into this. For the longest time, we've all been sold this absolute myth that intelligence is just a fixed genetic IQ number. You know the drill, that you're born with a certain amount of brain power, and that's it. You just have to play the hand you were dealt. But honestly, that couldn't be further from the truth. The question we're tackling today is a bit harsh, but it is entirely necessary. Are the things you do on autopilot every single day actually stealing your focus, weakening your memory, and destroying your capacity for deep thought? Because here's the thing about true intelligence, it's way more than just your DNA. It heavily depends on how you live your life day to day. It's about how you handle the massive waves of information hitting you all the time and how you actively train your brain to think clearly. The scary reality of our modern lifestyle is that it's slowly, quietly destroying our deep thinking abilities. Through a biological process called neuroplasticity, our brains are literally physically changing based on our daily routines. We're actively rewiring ourselves to be less sharp. And the crazy part is, most of us are completely blind to the damage. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to dissect 4 very specific, everyday habits that are quietly lowering your intelligence right now. Constant distraction, talking over listening, avoiding the hard stuff, and the ego trap. And then we'll wrap up by showing you exactly how breaking these habits can set your mind free.
Kicking things off with habit number 1, constant distraction.
Let's be brutally honest for a sec. Can you actually sit in complete silence for just 5 minutes without checking your phone, without refreshing a feed, opening a new tab, or checking for a notification? Look, when you constantly feed your brain cheap, instant dopamine, like short-form reels, gossip, or just endless scrolling, your brain actually downregulates its dopamine receptors. It develops a chemical addiction to instant gratification, completely losing the ability to sustain deep focus. Your brain basically learns to panic and run away from boredom. But here's the massive secret. Boredom is exactly where intelligence grows. An unoccupied mind, completely free from digital noise, is literally the only space where your brain's default mode network kicks in to connect complex ideas, solve latent problems, and actually think creatively. Think about it. Look back through history. Isaac Newton didn't conceptualize gravity while his mind was hyperstimulated by a dozen different inputs. He was famously just sitting quietly in an orchard, letting his mind wander. Archimedes was taking a quiet bath when he had his eureka moment. No truly smart person ever came up with a brilliant, world-changing idea while they were deeply distracted. So if you can't handle silence, you aren't just losing your focus. You are actively losing your deep thinking ability. Start small. Next time you're waiting in line or just going for a walk, do not touch your phone. Let your mind relax and just be bored for a minute. That's where the real rewiring of your intelligence actually begins. Moving right along to our second habit, talking over listening. You probably don't even realize you're doing this half the time. It's that tendency to interrupt someone mid-sentence, to argue just for the sake of winning a debate, or to jump into a conversation assuming you already know exactly what the other person is going to say. We really need to redefine what it means to be unintelligent. Low intelligence does not mean a lack of knowledge. It's the absolute refusal to take in new knowledge. When you prioritize speaking over listening, you're basically slamming the door shut on your own cognitive growth. You're telling your mind, hey, we don't need to learn anything new today. Smart people listen way more than they speak because they operate under the baseline assumption that every single person they meet knows something they don't. There's a great saying for this. The loudest in the room is often the least self-aware. See what I did there? I just paused. There is incredible power in a pause. The silent people in the room aren't disengaged or slow. They're usually the ones observing, processing information, identifying patterns, and connecting the dots. Active listening is fundamentally what makes you smarter, simply because it forces you to synthesize new perspectives that challenge your own. So it really comes down to checking your objective. When you're rushing to speak and constantly interrupting, you're usually just trying to look intelligent to everyone else. You want to prove you belong in the room. But the real goal is to actually be intelligent. In your very next conversation, I highly urge you to just pause. Don't rush to fill the silence. Ask a clarifying question instead. Choose to be the person who absorbs the room, rather than the person who just endlessly broadcasts to it. And that brings us to habit number 3, avoiding the hard stuff. Think back to the last time you tried to learn a tricky new skill. read a super dense book, or start a really complex project. The very second it got difficult, the moment you felt even a little bit lost, did you quit? A lot of people mistake this for laziness, but actually, scratch that. It isn't laziness at all. It's fear. It's the fear of looking stupid. But intelligence absolutely requires struggle to grow. Thanks to neuroplasticity, your brain acts exactly like a muscle in the gym. If you don't give it any resistance, it simply won't get stronger. If you always choose the path of least resistance, your mind just gets mentally soft. When you attempt a hard task and you actively face that discomfort, that confusion, or even outright failure, that exact cognitive strain is the stimulus your brain desperately needs to build new neural pathways and grow sharper. Seriously, this right here might be one of the most important takeaways from this entire explainer. When you're struggling with a concept and you start feeling dumb, do not run away. Most people flee from that discomfort, looking for the comfort of something easy, but you have to embrace it. Just like the burning sensation in your muscles during a heavy workout means you're getting stronger, that feeling of mental confusion is the literal, physical sensation of your brain expanding and rewiring itself. Facing discomfort instead of running from it is the fundamental mechanism of how real, lasting intelligence is built. Okay, let's get into habit number 4, and honestly, this is probably the trickiest one of the bunch, the ego trap. The ego trap totally sneaks up on you when you start believing that you already have life figured out. You convince yourself that you're right about your politics, your worldview, your industry, and that you really don't have anything left to learn. And this brilliantly illustrates the problem. When you assume you know it all, your growth instantly hits a brick wall. Deep reading ends, curiosity dies, and actual understanding is completely replaced by rigid opinions. Your thinking becomes incredibly narrow. On the flip side, truly smart people operate with what's called a beginner's mind. They never assume that the smartest in the room. They allow themselves to be clueless. They constantly ask questions and relentlessly test their own beliefs, kind of like a scientist testing a hypothesis. That deep intellectual humility is exactly what keeps their minds vibrantly alive and adaptable. So I've got a serious question for you, and I want you to really, truly think about it. When was the last time you changed your opinion on something important? If you honestly cannot remember the last time you changed your mind on a major topic, then you're probably not as right as you think you are. What it likely means is that you've simply stopped growing. You've basically traded intellectual expansion for the warm, cozy comfort of being certain. All right, section 5, solutions. Let's talk about how to actually break free from all of this. We've diagnosed the issues. Now, how do we reverse these negative effects and reclaim our cognitive power? Let's rapidly recap the 4 killers we just broke down. Constant distraction kills your focus. Talking more than listening kills your ability to learn new things. Avoiding hard things kills your mental growth. And pride, that insidious ego trap, kills your curiosity. The big, overarching theme here is completely undeniable. Low intelligence doesn't just mysteriously happen to people, and it doesn't just come from your genetics. It is actively shaped day in and day out by these very routines. But here is the really fantastic hopeful news. Your intelligence will naturally rise, not by forcing it, but by freeing it. You don't need to force yourself to become a genius overnight by reading a textbook a day or solving complex calculus. If you simply commit to breaking just one of these bad habits, you remove a massive roadblock that has been holding your mind back for years. By getting out of your own way, by putting the phone down, embracing a difficult task, or just listening for a change, your natural intelligence will effortlessly begin to elevate. So I'll leave you with this one final provocative thought. Out of the 4 habits we explored today, the constant distraction, the talking over listening, running from hard tasks, or the ego trap, which one are you going to break today? Be honest with yourself. Drop your worst habit down in the comments below. Let's hold each other accountable. And hey, if you found this breakdown valuable and want to keep sharpening your self-awareness, make sure to subscribe for more explainers exactly like this one.